Thank you all for being here. Huge day for our program. In our plan, and I've hit this before, but I'll hit it again, is our plan is to build our roster through high-level high school student athletes, develop them, and then retain them. And for most of these signees, this is a 2+ year process, and it truly takes a village. And I'm gonna do some name recognition here in a second. But I think myself and our 10 assistant coaches get a lot of credit. And the assistant, I don't know about myself, but our assistant coaches should. But it's really the people behind the scenes in recruiting now that truly make this happen. And it starts with Drew Fabianich. I butcher his name all the time, so you have to forgive me on that. But Drew, as the general manager, does a great job just leading this whole department. And then Trey Nyer, who's our director of recruiting, he's really the guy that makes this go. And he's got a great team: Ken Signoretti, Tyler Haywood, Ian Scafidi, Morgan Montgomery, Cam Hall. Those guys work tirelessly behind the scenes with starting the evaluation process, and then the communication, the early communication, and then on campus has grown so much. And I'll take you through our evaluation process here in a second. But on campus starts with Taylor West, who really, if you think about this, some people that are married in here, she basically, every time we host a recruit or a recruiting function, it's basically like putting on a wedding reception, if that makes it. So it's there's a lot going on, and she does a great job. And Lori Rice, my administrative assistant, she helps, and a lot of times just greeting with a smile is huge. And so then there's, you talk about the investment program wide into bringing in personnel, and it's vital we get the right people. And a lot of times, anytime we bring a person on campus, whether it's unofficial or official, there's a whole army of people that have to be here, and some of those aren't necessarily compensated like some of the assistant coaches are. And you think about it, creative, the production stuff has become so big now, and if you're not producing at a high level, then you're not getting quality student athletes. And so our creative people, Andrew Malowitz, Jake Herron, Ty Hunley, Ross Mara, and then Joe Mitchin running our socials, and then obviously Miney. Huge piece of what we're doing now, and it continues to grow, and their role only continues, whether it's photo shoots, how we're branding the program. It's so important. And then our support areas, strength conditioning, Mike and his crew, Vince and his crew in athletic training, academics, Brittany and Zach Seeger, they spend endless time, not only in person, but on Zooms. So much is done. The initial piece of this is done via Zoom now. So a lot of evenings. Our fifth quarter people, Rashid and Zach, and then compliance. They spend a lot of time, and they regulate what we're doing, as they should. And every time we have people here, they've got to be here. And then campus partners, admissions. We use a lot of the hosts that do the campus tours, and then our athletic administration obviously play a vital role. And Ren gets in front of as many of our guys as he can. And so I say all that because I want to recognize them, but it takes a lot of people, and it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of financials that go into it too. So to get us to this day, in our evaluation process, pretty simple. It starts with athletically, can they play? Are they good, and do they fit the need that we have? And then the second thing is academically, can they do the work, and can they succeed? And academically, we've done really well. I think that we'll release our team GPA for this fall semester at some point. It was right just maybe a hair under a 3.0, which is pretty impressive when you start dealing with 120 guys. And then the third thing, and this is the hardest, and this takes the most time, is from a character standpoint. Not only off the field character, but on the field character from a competitive standpoint. And that's where the real digging takes, and that's really where the success is, if you judge, on and off field character. and are they a fit in that room? Because that's the way you think about it. If you start thinking about your whole team, it's really hard. So what you have to do is, from a recruiting perspective, is you got to get the rooms right. Each individual room, you have to get that right. And the last thing I want to kind of mention before we get in, and I'll give you a line or two on each guy, and then y'all can ask questions, is it's a huge day for the student athlete. And I think sometimes, even you all as the media kind of get hardened to this process, and we recruit. We signed 22 today, and I don't know how many we had on official visits, but several more than 22, and we probably kind of really hard recruited about 200 to get to the 22. And so sometimes we get hardened to the process. But this is a huge day, and it's the culmination of a lot of hard work and a ton of investment by a lot of people. And there's less than 1% of all high school student athletes or high school football players go on to play Power 5 football and or Power 4 football, I guess, moving forward. But so it's a huge day. And probably the closer to my kids get to the age, the more appreciation I have for the parents and the coaches and their investment level to get these student athletes here. And so it's a huge day for them as well. Talking about our 24 class, 22 high school guys, 7 of these guys will enroll early, heavy in our local area. So we talk about our local area being within a 6-hour radius. We signed 16 guys within our 6-hour radius. Defensive back was a major point of emphasis. We have 5 of those, and then we continue to build on both our offensive and our defensive lines. Just real quick, I'll because I want to make sure I mention each guy, so I'm going to kind of go through here, and I'll go through them alphabetically and give you a little bit of kind of background. Start with Kyle Altuner from Good Counsel. He's an Under Armour All-American. We had him in camp twice and seen him play games multiple times. He's a state champ. Great football mind, tremendous worker. We're going to play him in the interior, and hopefully, I think center is where he's going to be his best fit. Luke Austin from Sterling, Illinois. He's a tackle, really athletic. His dad's a high school principal where he goes, so I can relate to that because my dad was my high school principal. And he's really fluid. Made a big jump between his junior and senior year. And sometimes that gets overlooked because a lot of these decisions are made early. But he's a guy that we continue to evaluate. We saw him back in the spring, continued to evaluate him through the summer. And he played really well this year. And his athleticism in basketball is really what kind of drew us in early. Israel Boyce from Douglas County. You're going to hear me say this about a lot of our defensive backs. There's versatility. He played corner and safety and nickel in high school. He was a high school teammate of Zach Keith, who we signed last year, who redshirted for us in the fall. And we had him in live. We saw him scrimmage, and Shadon saw him and really felt like he was a good fit for what we're trying to do. Makai Byerson will be a defensive end, Manchester High School in Richmond, Virginia. His dad, he's a legacy. His dad played basketball here for Coach Beeline. And he's a basketball player too, really good athlete, played tight end in high school. And, I think he's a guy that can play early. Dom Collins. And so we talk a lot on offense, and Chad, this is something we really emphasize why guys play here. It's about production. And so we had Dom twice in camp, and he ran, really, really fast. As fast as any 40 time that I've seen live, and a couple of you guys were there. And then he went out and had 83 catches for almost 2,000 yards, and watched him in the state championship game. And so his production, earned him this opportunity. And so the next guy would be Jason Cross. He's a safety. Played in the Whippeal, which is obviously really good football. He's the first D1 signee at that high school since 1980, which was the year I was born, so it's been a while. And we had him live in 7-on-7, and some of you guys saw him there too. Really like his body control. I think he's going to continue to fill out and be a safety here. Travion Dunbar goes back to production again. He's been on campus multiple times. We watched him as he went through his senior year. And think about this. He ran for over 3,000 yards as a senior. That's and good football too in South Carolina. the big one today was Day Farmer. And Day, I think Chad was one of his first offers, if not his first offer. And a lot of credit to Chad and Bilal because they just kept on. And he from Melbourne, and he's been really productive. He's a great kickoff returner. He'll play early. He's got to gain weight, but he'll play early for us. Nate Gabriel from Auburndale, same high school, is Aubrey Burks, and state heavyweight wrestling champion, in the state of Florida. And I think it's well documented. We've had good success with wrestlers here. So excited about him. Chris Henry's, I think, really the sleeper of our class. A versatile guy, played multiple positions. His high school coach has a lot of ties to the state of West Virginia, and he's actually playing an all-star game today. And we saw him live and saw him play basketball too, and just a guy that he could play corner or safety. We'll start him at corner and see, but I think he's kind of the sleeper. Dior Hubbard from Gahanna Lincoln, finalist for Mr. Ohio. If you look at his production in a really competitive league over there in Columbus, we've seen him live twice, and as a junior and as a senior, and he not only runs the ball, but he catches it really well. And he's a guy that I think, in that room that Chad's building, he'll be another guy that's going to be ready to play. We've had success playing guys early in there. Zay Jennings, really excited about him. Saw him as an option quarterback at Colerain. And early on in the process, they were doing box jumps in an off-season workout, and he jumped. I watched him jump, and I was like, man, this is going to be bad. He's going to gash his knee pretty good here. Sure enough, he jumps on top of it. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And end up transferring to Winton Woods, played safety. That's what he'll play for us. And he'll be here in January. I think he's going to be a guy that'll be a contributor for us early. Curtis Jones Jr. from Cabell Midland. I think he might be the best football player overall in the state as a high school senior. I thought he was really good. Played running back there. We project him to be a linebacker. We had him in camp. He ran really well. I think he's got a huge upside. And Elijah Kinsler won a state championship at Bergen Catholic. That's one of the top high school programs in the country. AJ did a great job staying on him. And great family, a lot of energy. We saw him live as well multiple times, but he played extremely well as a senior. He's an early enrollee too. Obina Onwuka, he'll be an edge guy for us. He's got speed and power. He played at Flowers High School, really good high school in Maryland. I think he's got huge upside, and we beat a bunch of people to get him. Brandon Raymond, 3-time state champion at St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia. Obviously, high school teammates of Josiah Trotter, and he was really good in the return game. When they come from that program, they're ready to go. They know what work looks like. They know what the preparation looks like. Keyshawn Robinson, we had him in camp twice. I don't know, a lot of you guys follow this, but I haven't recruited very many guys that won the 100, the 200, and the 400. That's the thing that's impressive to me. Like you see the 1-2 combo, but you don't see the 1-2-4. And he's at Jefferson High School, and he's an athlete. He can play either side. I've been really impressed. The kid's a hard worker, and he's going to be a really good player. Jack Samarco is a guy that played his best football as a senior, transferred to Anderson High School in Cincinnati. And he's a guy that's big. He's got the size right now. He had a really good receiving year for them. And he'll be here early as well. And Justin Terry is just a huge human being. He's got great feet. He's got length. It's going to be a developmental process for him. But I think very similar to Johnny Williams, who we feel really good about being a factor for us next year. Keon Washington came to camp this summer and ran well and played corner and showed the ability to play man coverage. He was at a camp where we had some really talented wideouts, and he did a really good job. Did a little bit of everything at St. Charles High School. Played receiver, DB, kick return, punt return. Good athlete. He's versatile. Again, we'll start him at corner, but he could play all three positions in the secondary. And then Khalil Wilkins, you guys that came, we had him in camp, and then we had him 7-on-7. And the day we had him in 7-on-7, he really put on a show. Made all kinds of big-time throws, and I sit right there on the golf cart behind him. And that's kind of like, and you golfers, that's kind of like sitting on the first tee, right? And you got the head coach sitting right behind you, and he threw dime after dime. And he's going to be here in a couple weeks, and it's going to be, again, a developmental process for him, but he can run. He's legit fast. And when Mike Joseph gets a hold of him, I think he'll add good weight and only get faster. And he's got all kinds of arm talent. And so I'm excited to work with him. And then our last guy, but certainly not our least, Ricky Williams from Archbishop Hoban. And just a winner. That's a program that's won. He played receiver as a sophomore. And his body changed, and he moved to Mike linebacker as a junior and senior. And I think his best football is in front of him, and he was really productive at Hoban. And so just a tough kid and really good addition. And I like what we're doing. You know, I think that we're making some strides at our first and second level defensively. We got to continue, you know, to build at our third level. So I know that was a long monologue, and but there's some people I wanted to recognize, and I wanted to make sure I said everybody that we signed. So with that, questions, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned defensive back a little bit, but needs going in, do they change much as you go through, you know, the fall, see what you actually have, what you lose, and how'd you fill the needs?
We, you know, the needs were kind of what they were. You kind of project the, and so really, you know, if you have some needs that change, you really take care of those through the portal now. And especially if we lose a young guy, then we try to replace him with a young guy in the portal. Most of these guys, you know, we recruited for a really long time. And even like Day, who we got today, I mean, we recruited him for 2+ years. He was up here a bunch of different times. And so I really I'm hesitant about getting in on guys late. And just because – so our needs at the start pretty much maintain our needs. If something happens during the fall, then we usually, you know, in this time, we're addressing through the portal.
In terms of Day, how, if you can, I guess, how close were you? Because he was originally committed to Pitt and then flipped, and then now has flipped again. How close were you at that point? Was that a disappointment that you almost had to regroup and wonder maybe where you went wrong and then still went after him? What allowed you to be confident to still go after a kid who already had flipped once with a 4-star?
Yeah, so I think that each case is unique. And so when a kid makes an initial decision, and let me say this, I'd be for guys, if as soon as you offer them, if they could sign, I'd be good with that. All right. And so you kind of get, I think each situation is different. You kind of get a feel for, you know, how solid they are, right? And there's some guys that when they make a commitment, they don't have communication, and you try, and then, okay, you get a feel for that's what it is. Or you say, hey, listen, we're still interested. We're not going to communicate as often, but if you reach back out to us, and there's some guys that you just get a feel that this is the best place for them, and you're going to pursue them to the very end. And that's what it was with Day. Felt like that that Chad and Bilal and myself, all three of us, had really good connections with him. And if you look, he'll start in the slot. And if you go back and look from about 2007 on, we've had really good success with slots. You know, some really highly productive people. We had them at Troy. We've had them at Kentucky. We had them at Tech. We had them back at Troy. We had them here. And so our track record with slot receivers has been really, really strong. And, you know, I think, too, that with our receiver room, you know, we set out about a year ago, and it's been a process really that we've kind of started remaking this receiver room since we underperformed that bowl game 2 years ago in Arizona. And the people that we had, it wasn't a great room. The camaraderie wasn't great. The chemistry wasn't great. So it's been a kind of a process to get that room where they work. They've got a really good attitude. There's good energy in there. They're good teammates. And we've got a mix of different types of players, but we got some veteran leadership in there and some guys that that are role players. And so it's been a process, and I don't think the makeover is just complete just yet. But I really like kind of where we're going with that room, and I think Bilal Marshall has quietly done like a great job in that room, handling that room. If you look at what he's got, like our guys, like if you look at we're playing 3 freshmen a lot, you know, and we do a lot. You know, I'll let Jed come up here and preach on that, but we do a lot with them. All right, as far as, you know, in Hudson and Rodney and Traylon Ray and some guys, like some good veteran guys in there, and Preston and Devin, we that room's getting close, and I like these additions that we've added today.
You mentioned some Marco, Kensler, Wilkins. Who else is enrolling early?
All right, we got 7. So I'm going to go through these. Khalil Wilkins, Israel Boyce, Zay Jennings, Nate Gabriel, Elijah Kinsler, Samarco, and Obi. Is that right?
You mentioned the 6-hour radius early in your remarks. Has that been the biggest adjustment or thing that you've learned from the time you started to where you are now in your 5 years here?
Yeah, I've got a much better feel for like who we can get and what's the right fit. There's no doubt. You got to recruit a big area here, and I think that you can get spread too thin if you're not careful. And I think it takes a little while to get the right people in the right areas. And I'm not saying we got it figured out just yet. There's probably some areas that we need to continue to work on. But it's been a learning process. Yeah, absolutely. But I think we had the right idea at the beginning. I don't know if our execution was the best. But I think that we're getting closer to what we need to be.
This seems like this is a product of what you've learned over 5 years, what we see today. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that, I think too, probably over the last, certainly over the last year, we've got, I'm probably more comfortable in knowing who's going to be successful in our program here. And we're not exactly for everybody. And even if that kid's not the highest rated kid, I say no a lot more than I probably used to. And if I don't have a good feel when they're here or when I go to see them in school or in their home, if I don't have a good feel, then we X those guys. Where in the past, and I think that's just part of becoming more comfortable too. But in the past where I would maybe take a chance, I'm less likely to take a chance unless we have a great room. If we have a great room, I don't mind putting a at-risk kid in there because I think we can, the overall quality of the room will take over. But, yeah, for sure.
What was Dom Collins' reaction? I think you just recently offered him.
Yeah, he's excited. Yeah, he's excited. He, and the thing, it's going to be a process for him. He's got great speed. He's improved a lot as a football player over the last calendar year. But there's a lot that he's still got to continue. He's got to add some weight. He's got to add some muscle. I think that from a return standpoint, he may be able to help early. He's got a lot to still learn receiver wise. I think he would echo that. But man, was he really, really productive, and I think that he really wants to be here, and I think that matters.
When you took over, did you expect that the state of West Virginia would produce what, you've already had coming out of the state, and then now you got 3 more in this class. Did you think that was going to be possible?
Well, I didn't know to say that we would have that many starters on offense from West Virginia. I don't know if that was my expectation. I've always felt like this, and I think you and I have had this conversation before. I always felt like if you could have, 20 to 25-year scholarship players were West Virginia products, then that meant that, a little over a quarter of your roster understood what the program meant to the state. And they could really not only set the standard but also communicate how important it is to our state that and who we represent. They could communicate that. And so I always felt like if we could get around that, and we also know that, because of our population, not because of the level of play or not because of the coaching, but just because of our population, we're not going to have as many as some other states. And so I think that you have to identify them early, and then you have to recruit them. And listen, we didn't get every one of them. There's probably at least one, maybe two that could have played for us in the state this year that we didn't get, and it's going to happen sometime. But I think over the course of our 5 years here, we've got a high percentage, if not almost all of them, that have the potential, and so I think we got to continue to do that. And the walk-on program's been vital to us. And that was my other, if there's going to be 2 to 4 scholarship players each year, you need to get almost every one of them. And then you need to do a great job. We need to continue to do a great job with our walk-on program, because several of those guys will turn into scholarship players. And they usually have a little bit more patience than maybe some of the scholarship. I think you're seeing that Preston Fox, Nick Malone, some of those guys. And so that was our vision early on. It's starting to come into fruition. But to say that I thought we'd have seven of the 15 guys or whatever that play a lot on offense or West Virginia guys, probably not. I hope we can maintain that. I think it's good. I think that'd be a high point for the program if we could.
This was the first cycle for Blaine and Bilal. Mm-hmm. Just how do you think they did?
So I think I'll talk about Bilal first. And I said this when I hired him, I think he can be an elite recruiter, and I think he's going to continue to rise. And he does a great job from a teaching standpoint. He can relate. He's a extremely effective communicator. He's got a big picture, and he's really hungry. And so he does a great in recruiting wise. Like he was the one that really. I think if you had to ask, like Chad did a lot of the legwork, but then Bilal came in and did a lot of the finishing to get Day signed today. So that was big. And then Blaine, Blaine's transitioning. He hadn't spent any time in college, and so this was a huge transition for him in the recruiting, and he's still learning. The thing that he does a great job is when he's in front of the player. There's nobody better on our staff that can sell West Virginia and what it means. I mean, he grew up in this building, and so he can sell what that means, and then he'll continue to understand not on all the stuff that goes into it and how to set up recruiting and stuff. So I would say he's in the process, but he's going to be really, really good at it.
How important is it also to try to pinpoint someone to try to get locked in early in the process, namely like Abina, for example? Mm-hmm. He was locked in and vocally like recruiting guys, becoming a WU fan for almost a year now. Yep. It felt like. How important was he to help land some of these guys, and how important is it to pinpoint a guy like that to materialize into this type of class?
Yeah, well, what I'll say is this, okay? I think a lot of times what happens in recruiting, if you get a quarterback committed early, then that really stems it, and they do a lot of the recruiting because they a lot of times have bigger name recognition, right? In those years where you're going to be more patient with your quarterback recruiting, or you're not taking a recruiting, you need some strong personalities on each side of the ball. And the thing that I thought was big for us is early in the process, we got Obi, who did a great job and was vocal. And then we got Kyle Altuner also, and we beat a bunch of different high-level programs for both of those players. And both of them committed very early in the summer, stuck with it, and were vocal and supportive throughout the process, and I think that really helped.
What would you say are the 3 or 4 golden rules of recruiting for a coach?
Golden rules, I don't know. I think it's here's what I think is, this is for me, so I'm not talking about West Virginia. I'm just talking for me, is you have to have honest communication, and the second thing is I think you have to be who you are. Be who you are. And what I mean by that is a lot of times, so playing time is all about trust. Like the coach has to trust the player to get the most out of the player. The player's got to trust the coach. A lot of times what happens is there's in recruiting, and this is the way I've been since I was early in this, is like I think that what happens in recruiting sometimes is the individual that recruits the player is different than the individual that coaches the player. And what I mean by that is everything is great and there's no difficult conversations. You know, they try to be their friend in recruiting, and then when they get on campus, they're completely different. And so, like, everything that I try to do is I try to look at it from that 16, 17, 18-year-old's perspective. And to me, if they're coached, as soon as they get on campus, they're treated differently, then the first indicator, like that, I would have a hard level. That would be hard to trust that individual. And so for me, and this is what I try to talk to our staff about, and I don't mean that we're perfect, but try to talk to our staff about is be the same person recruiting that you are coaching them. And so, and sometimes that's effective, and then sometimes it's not. But I think that's the big thing for me is communicate, honest communication, and then be the same person in recruiting that you're going to be when you have them on campus and you're coaching them.
How does it differ selling a school to an 18-year-old than selling his first car to him?
Well, I think you got to be careful because I think sometimes, like, first of all, these guys are a lot more intelligent than people give them credit for. And if it looks like a rat and smells like a rat, it's probably a rat, and they can sniff it out. And so I think that you know, you just got to be upfront, you know, and I think the days of there's so much information now. Like, they can get so much information. You're not going to trick them. And the other thing, too, is, like, they can have in one direct message, they can communicate with everybody on your team. And so you're not hiding anything. You know, you're not hiding anything anymore. So I think you just be upfront with them, and you're going to get the one. If you're upfront and you're honest through this whole process, you're going to get the ones you're supposed to get.
Sometimes when you recruit, you're fixing the things that either went wrong or you didn't get the years prior. The impression I get, and I could be wrong, is that you're supplementing or complementing what you did last year and what you've got. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were intentional. If you go back and look at it, I mean, we were really intentional about, from an offensive line standpoint. And Monty, we'll wait for a second because, like, I went on a monologue where I mentioned a bunch of people, so if they got questions. But they all right, I saw Monty kind of walking over here. What did you ask? Yeah, so, all right, so if you go back and look at it, offensive line-wise, okay? So if you think about it, like, we were really intentional to get to where we're at offensive line-wise. Man, we had to be really intentional with high school recruiting and being real specific with the transfers we added to there, okay? And so now, if you look at it, we did the same thing from a defensive line standpoint, and we really had very few transfers. That was all high school, and then really banking on the developmental process. And then with this class, portal-wise, and with this, we got our linebacker room kind of where we want it, and it took some building there. We just talked about the receiver room. That's been a 2-year process to really kind of cleanse it and get it where we want it to be, right? And so now we're kind of on the defensive back. We got to kind of, you know, we've got to get and more quality depth, more quality players there, and we're going to have to address that. We did it in high school. We got 5, and we're in the process of doing that in the portal. Probably need to add 1 or 2 more in the portal as well. And so you got to be intentional and think about it, like, from my perspective, the way I'm looking at it is rooms. Like, we got to get the rooms right.
Along those lines with the linebacker, just kind of interesting to hear you talk about the way you built the defensive line linebacker, but I was just thinking about what you said about Floyd at Spear the other day, where you kind of have been playing 5 defensive backs, and now you're adding pieces in the line. I'm not saying you ditch what you have, but, like, more traditional, like 4-3 or 3-3 with linebackers, just because I think you wanted bigger bodies at that second level and more of them there. I'm not saying it's the wave of the future, but it gives you that weaponry or that ability.
So what we're trying to do is, you know, we've been a 3-4. That's really what we've been all year. We've been a 3-4 defense, and that's what we want to continue to be moving forward because we think we can really I think it's a better fit. You know, John asked the question about you kind of learn, and as we've learned, like, there's certain body types that we can recruit, and some of the bigger defensive ends, you see us signing them today. We feel like we can get some of those bigger bodies here. And then from a linebacker standpoint, really looking at 2 box linebackers, where before this year we were playing more of a kind of a one true Mike and then kind of a faster guy at will. And now we've gone to more playing 2 of a box linebacker, and we got to add to those. And you want those guys bigger and can grow. And then you want to have the ability where you can match personnel a little bit. We won't do this necessarily in the bowl game, but you want to have the ability where you can play a bigger kind of Sam linebacker to the field, all right, what we call a spear, and then having another DB to add in and nickel, but we don't have that. We don't have that versatility just yet. And so we got to continue to do that.
With the way recruiting has changed, Neal, is this kind of it for high school kids? Do you kind of turn full focus to transfers, or?
So what we're going to do is, so you're asking about the February signing. I'm not saying we won't. There may be an instance where we could, but that's not what I have planned right now. So I think we've got 6 transfers right now. That's probably going to be in the 10-ish. I'd like to add, get it. We talked about 8 to 12, so I'm just falling in the middle. When we start in January, and what we're going to do is now our attention turns, and just talking about our 24 roster, is trying to add quality walk-ons. A lot of those guys will be from the state of West Virginia, but we're going to spend time investing in that. And now with the new calendar in 25, our 25 class, we'll spend the month of January working on that.
Obviously, busy time of year. You got a chance to talk to Jared about taking the Corey job?
Yeah. And, so happy for him. Wanted, that's a place that means a lot to me. I talk about Troy sometimes, and that was my first Division I job, first coordinator job, and first head coaching job. So a lot of first at Troy, and then 2 of our kids were born there too. So, I thought the final pool of candidates, I think any of those individuals would have been a really good hire for Troy, and Jared will do a great job. And his family will be a great addition to that community too. Candy and their 4 kids.
Comments about the safeties and versatility there. Does that fold into Mike's question about what you're trying to do going forward, having more versatility with what you can do with the cat and and those other guys to match better?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Kevin. So what we want to do is, if you look, speed and length. That's what we're trying to do. Speed and length, and not necessarily pigeonhole. Hey, this guy's got to be a corner. This guy's going to be a nickel. This guy's going to be a safety. Let's get them all. And what we'll do is, now starting in the winter, is they'll kind of go, and we'll move those pieces around a lot in the spring and into fall, in the summer and fall camp, trying to figure out what the best position for them is. We just hadn't had enough. If you go back and look at our snap count of how many snaps that Aubrey's played, how many snaps that Anthony Wilson played, Marcus later in the year, we got to get some more guys that can play. Whether those are transfers or whether those are high school freshmen that are coming in, we got to play more bodies back there. And then the other thing too is we struggled. We haven't played as well in special teams. Our punt team's been great, but we got to get significantly better on kickoff and punt return and kickoff return. And where we're missing is those mid-type bodies, right? Linebackers, bigger safeties, and those are the ones that show up on kickoff. If you look at ours, our kickoff team has less of those bodies than most people we play against. So we got to be able to in some of this transfer-wise and high school recruiting, the thought process not only on defense but also getting help on special teams.
Kind of a long-term back view. 10 years ago, 8 years ago on this day, there were always questions about, hey, is this guy going to qualify? Is he going to earn enough? That doesn't seem to be a problem. Is that your personal philosophy? You're not going to look at guys that are on the edge, or is it just kind of a change? High school kids are more savvy now and know they got to do that.
Well, the rules have changed, first of all, Kevin. So you really, if you have any question on if a kid's going to make it or not, you err on not signing them now, because from a numbers standpoint, you're taking a risk. Okay, so And then you see less risk taking because there's so many more available guys because of the portal also. And so there's a couple of our guys that they still got to finish their senior year strong, you know. Not every one of our guys is fully qualified. The other thing is that since COVID now, the test score is not a factor. And so that's where a lot of guys really struggle from an eligibility standpoint, was on that standardized test, and now it's not a factor. So it's not as big a play. But I think that's a multitude of reasons. But I feel really – everybody that we signed today, I feel really confident, not only in their ability but the support around them to get it done as they head toward graduation. Anybody else? Yep.
I just wanted to quickly ask Neal, that obviously you can't talk about players that committed elsewhere, but do you already have a list in your mind, and how do you go about moving forward? Because you lose a guy now, you could easily re-recruit him next year, and you mentioned retaining players here. It's a year-long thing.
Yeah, I think that how you end it is important. You know, like, I don't take any of this stuff personal anymore. Like, if a kid doesn't come here, like, you know, just I don't take it personal. Now, what I'll say is, so, like, we have a recruiting database, right? So our recruiting database, it used to be after signing day, you would just flush it. Well, now everything stays active because you never know. They may show up in it 2 years ago and be in the 2 years and be in the portal. So you want to keep all your information relevant. All right, I'll say that. But here's how we handle this. So, like, there's no doubt when somebody goes in the portal, the first thing that our personnel, led by Drew, with our personnel department does is, do we have a relationship with that student athlete? Were they here on campus? Because if you've had them on campus before, you have a much better chance in the portal recruiting process because it happens so fast. You know, the portal opens, official visits, yes or no. You know, and so if you have prior relationships, or they have a working knowledge of who you are already, or who your program is, or they know what the facilities are and all that kind of stuff, that helps you. Now, if we don't necessarily think a kid's a fit in high school, then we're not even paying attention if they do go in the portal. But guys that we genuinely like or genuinely wanted that we don't get during high school recruiting, is how we end that. Like, I had a conversation with a kid last night, you know, and I didn't necessarily agree with his decision, but I was like, you know, hey, good luck, wish you the best, you know, and part of this probably maturity on my end too, but, you know, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, I'd been pissed about it. Now I'm not. I'm just kind of, you know, there's plenty of guys out there. You know, we'll find the right guys. Mike, you had a question?
Your 3-4 for a second. Your defensive line would kind of look about the same, right? Bigger guys at the ends who could tackle end.
Yep.
I understand cornerback, still have cat and free, but those 4 positions, right? Not linebackers. Would you still have a bandit? Would that be different?
We still have a bandit.
Okay, but that'd be like your.
So what we want to do is we kind of want to have some different body types. You know, we want to have some bigger guys. Like, if we're playing some more run-oriented teams, that we can play bigger guys. And we kind of did that. Tyron's a bigger guy. You know, Tyron's 260 plus. Obi in this class is a guy that's going to be a big guy that we recruited to play there. But then you want some guys that can rush the passer too. And I think you'll see some of those guys that we'll try to add via the portal that can do that.
Portal needs, 4 more or so, roughly. What are you looking for?
Yeah, continue the defensive backs. You know, like we talked about. Like to add another edge guy. You know, have to be the right guy offensively. You know, we've added one to the receiver room, which I think is a quality add, and so, you know, receiver and the O-line, it'd have to be the right guy, and then, you know, a multiple year tight end, where we'd kind of fall. All right, yep, thanks guys.